brain. Welcome into his frequency. Enter at your own risk. Come be at peace with me. Ask the Paul, where we rise and don't fall.
Welcome back to another episode of Baxter's Buzz. I am your host, Baxter E. Hall. Welcome to my brain. Welcome to my frequency. Enter at your own risk. The gentleman here that's not smiling at all, he is, there we go. He is the principal attorney and founder of AMS Global Immigration, assisting companies with all aspects of U.S. immigration. Chris Allen, my buddy. Welcome to Baxter's Buzz, finally.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here. Feels like we've been talking about this forever. I'm glad we finally made it happen.
You know, my favorite guests are my friends, first and foremost, selfishly, but then more importantly are people that I'm always learning from and having great conversations with anyway. It's like, you know what? There may be some other folks who may benefit from this. So I'm glad that you are on, and I'm looking forward to learning more about you and having the audience learn more about you as well.
All right, great. Again, thanks for having me. I hope that I fall into both categories, friend and good conversations.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. It's not everyone. It's not everyone. So trying to think, we were just talking about how long we go back. We go back for a while. I would say 7, 8 years.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah.
And obviously I've always known you as the immigration guy, but you're just a wealth of knowledge and just an overall great resource. And we'll talk a bit more about that. But as far as it relates to like U.S. immigration or immigration in general, how does one decide if that's the path that they're going to take?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, initially, it's I've joked for many years that I'm always the weird immigration guy in the corner. No one really has any idea what the heck we actually do all day, and that's fine. I fit that niche well, and that's a good segue into how you get into this field, right? Because I've done nothing but this for pushing 35 years now, and it was a complete fluke, honestly. And I've realized over the decades that people who are in my profession typically get in for one of only two reasons. One is that they've had some sort of experience with the U.S. immigration system themselves. A lot of immigration attorneys maybe married someone from abroad, had to, do their own spouse's green card or family. They might be first generation immigrants, that sort of thing. So that draws a lot of attorneys to the field. The rest of us tended to just stumble on it like I did. So if we have time, I'll give you the 10-minute story on it, maybe less. I'm in law school, and I went to law school down at Tulane University in New Orleans, and I'm in my second of 3 years, and I will never forget. I call up my parents and I said, "Oh my God, I hate law school. I don't like lawyers. I think I've made a huge mistake," right? But I'm signing these documents that I'm pretty sure are loan agreements, right? So I have to now graduate, right? There's no question about it. And I was panicking. I didn't know what to do. I was doing fine. I'm getting straight A's. I was captain of the debate team. I can get into a courtroom and win an argument, no problem. But I just didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
And then just by sheer luck, I actually have a dual degree in U.S. and European Union law. And one of my electives in the European Union legal practice program was U.S. immigration law. And I needed a credit. So I just threw it on my schedule my third year. And I swear I was in that class for 2 hours and it just clicked. I just loved it. From that point forward, I knew that I had to graduate, of course. I had to pass the bar, but I was going to forget every single thing I learned, and I was doing nothing but this the rest of my life. And that's essentially what I did.
Wow. So what was it about U.S. immigration that really got you excited?
Yeah, it was a couple of things. So the first is, I don't, as you know me well, I don't think this will be a surprise to probably almost anybody who knows me, but I tend to be a very process detail oriented, a lot of people would probably say I'm very anal retentive about a lot of things, right? My staff, I run my own law firm for most of my life. My staff used to come in and move something on my desk 5 inches, and then they would set a timer to see how long till Chris notices, right? So immigration is very much like that, right? When we're about to hire a new paralegal, in fact, and I always tell people it's very complicated. It's completely counterintuitive, very administrative, so process, detail, procedure oriented, but it's not rocket science. I could teach it to almost anyone who is reasonably smart and has a penchant for that sort of thing. So what I will usually tell a new paralegal when they're coming in is you need to be the type of person who loves filling out a 46-page government form, knowing that if you check one box wrong on page 12, not only do we lose, there's no way for me to fix it. I'll probably get sued for malpractice. That's the field, right? Now, for me, I thrive in that environment, right? I love that kind of thing. We create all sorts of quality control procedures to make sure that never happens. It never has happened, obviously. But that really is just fits my personality perfectly.
Yeah.
So there was that, and the second biggest thing was I was actually fluent in German at the time. My grandmother was a genealogist. She dug up all this German heritage. She took myself and my siblings, each of us, on a trip to Germany to see these distant relatives and cousins. And
wow.
And I took German language all through high school, all through college, and actually all through law school. I was a certified translator. I was making money, on the side, translating technical documents for German companies. It was great beer money. I don't know if I can say that. So I figured, well, immigration, this is perfect, right? I'll graduate. I'm going to come back to Michigan. I'm going to get hired by VW. They'll send me to Germany, and I'll just never come back. I'll live there my whole life. And the immigration thing worked out great. It turns out that's not how big companies work.
Yeah.
So the VW thing didn't work out, but it was great in the end.
No, that makes so much sense. And I just think about being able to sort of match. Like there's this argument that you have you have to follow your passion, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the argument where your passion should really be what you're good at, right? And if you happen to be good at it, many times that you develop a passion for it. And so it sounds like you kind of had a good mix of them both in many ways. You were already in law school, knowing that you were going to complete this degree, but then you had this very specific segment of law that really caters to your personality and who you were aside from law, right? So you were able to kind of marry those two things. And most of us don't get that lucky, right?
Yeah, it was very lucky. I mean, a lot of people say, well, you were kind of predestined for that. We know your personality. And I'm thinking at the time, Tulane University was one of only, I think it was 15 or so schools that even had a vibrant immigration program, a class, and there was a clinic. So I worked in a clinic for indigent clients my entire third year. It was a fairly rare thing back then. So it was very lucky. I am very appreciative of that.
So right now, you founded AMS Global Immigration. This is not your first time with your own firm. You've done your own thing. You've been a part of a larger firm, right? Give me some differences, some like pros and cons to both. Like, what do you enjoy about having your own? And then tell me about your experience working for like larger firms.
Yeah, so a couple of things always jump to mind when I'm talking about that. The first one being that I'm a bit of a know-it-all. I like to do things my way, and you can really only do that in a small boutique firm. But most immigration lawyers historically are solos or in very small boutique firms, 3 to 5 lawyers. Over the past, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years, some very large firms have sprung up. There was one very large firm that has been around for a long time that I actually worked with them for a couple of years. And now there are several where we're talking, a couple thousand lawyers doing nothing but U.S. immigration. So those firms exist, but most of us tend to be solos. And it's because what we do is so unusual, so unique. I think there can be a lot of great things about being part of a big firm, but I don't think it was a great match for me, my personality, my team's personality, my style of work. It can be a little stifling. There's a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of politics, and
Sure.
we tend to just by necessity be very fast and nimble. I've operated as a small business startup organization for 35 straight years. Sometimes I was in the middle of this giant organization and they just could not wrap their heads around it. Right?
Yeah.
Most of the time, I think I was out of law school 2 or maybe 3 years when I said, you know what, I can do this all better, and just hung up a shingle, as we call it. So just form my own firm. And had a couple of different partnership arrangements over the years, but it's essentially been my own firm, my own group since 1996, I believe.
Well, that's good for you. And it sounds like you were very much a trailblazer in many ways. Just the amount of folks that are coming over to work. I mean, I'm sure, and I know this personally because we talk, but there's no 1,000 attorney firms doing only immigration if there's no money there, right? So there's talk about when you saw things really start to take off as far as just this influx of, sort of international talent coming over to the U.S. and how that impacted the business that you were running.
Yeah, that's another great question, because I think it actually kind of belies how most native-born U.S. citizens think about our immigration system. And I don't want you to take this the wrong way, but most people are very, very confused about what's actually happening. All they see is the craziness on the news, right? There's caravans hitting the southern border, or I don't know, we're like separating children and putting them in cages, just absolute insanity, right?
Yeah.
And I've obviously got all sorts of personal political views about those things, but that has nothing to do with what we do all day.
Mm-hmm.
We assist companies on the legal side of the immigration system to bring over this talent and get them work authorized, possibly permanent residents to stay. And the reason I point that out is because, believe it or not, since the early 1990s, when I first started doing this, it's basically just been constantly busy.
Oh, wow.
So one of the busiest times in my career was the late 90s during the IT boom, right? There were just tens of thousands of foreign workers flooding into the country because the demand was off the chart. We're subject to the auto industry and the economy just like everybody else in Southeast Michigan, right? So, 2008, we took a hit, and then it came back up, and all of that. But honestly, it's been a field where hardly any of us really struggle to keep busy. Most of us are, in my world, are struggling with how busy do I want to be? How big do I want my team to be? Because, again, it seems like the need has just been constant.
So larger firms have to kind of catch up. They saw the opportunity a little bit later, but the more nimble, smaller shops had already kind of known that there was a ton of business out there, right?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Back in, when I started doing this back in the 90s, there was a couple of big law firms that had maybe one lawyer, maybe two, and they were kind of the outliers, even in the business immigration world. We were almost all boutiques. It's changed a little bit more recently. Most of the big firms have jumped into the game somewhat. And again, there's a couple of huge boutique law firms that do have more than 1,000 lawyers doing nothing but this now.
Wow.
But the reality is it was mostly the smaller firms. And again, we were always pretty busy. So the bigger firms kind of came to us and said, we keep getting asked,
Yeah.
and most of us would say, well, there's no way we're joining a big law firm. That seems like a nightmare, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I, of course, did it twice just to make a point that I can't learn my lesson.
Just mix it up a little bit. Yeah.
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 So,
I think there's something to be said for, being nimble, um, and being able to sort of change on a dime, and how big organizations, they're big ships. They just aren't able to move in that manner. What is the reason in immigration specifically that one would have to be so nimble? Like what are the types of things that you're encountering where you like that nimbleness is an advantage?
yeah, I'll give you the perfect example of that because I was just talking to another employment attorney friend of mine the other day about this. We were actually in a group of other what we call resource partners, and the issue came up about how busy you are. And she was saying she's an employment attorney. She was saying I'm very busy, but I think Chris is more. And so we started discussing about or talking about what is your average caseload, and an average employment attorney like her will have somewhere around maybe 20 to 25 active files they're working on. And that's a lot of work because each of those files could be some sort of odd, discrimination lawsuit or something like that.
Sure.
And I told her, that's cute. We have something like 400 active files,
Wow.
and they will crank, right? We'll open them and close them sometimes in 10 days, maybe 2 weeks. So there's just a massive amount of data and volume and kind of production capacity that we have that we're required to have for our clients that normal attorneys don't. And that then sort of demands a completely different business model, even though we are a law firm, right? We need software tools. We need the ability to produce things in very high volume. For instance, my team has gone completely paperless, but the government hasn't. So at the end of every single case, we are printing hundreds of pieces of paper and shipping them in FedExes because that's pretty much the only way to file with the government.
Wow.
When I joined some of the bigger law firms, they were floored with how much paper I told them we need. Right? They just couldn't fathom it because they're putting together contracts that are 100 pages. And I'm telling them, no, 100 pages 25 times a day, every
Wow.
single day. Even we were doing some budgeting here at the beginning of this year and just looking at our numbers. And we, even in our little group alone now, because AMS Global is a smaller team, I think we went through almost 90,000 pieces of paper in 2023.
Oh my goodness.
It's huge, right? So that's the kind of thing that's just so different from what most regular attorneys do. It's really tough to put that into the big firm model, where they're making plenty of money
It's
doing
not
their thing, right? They don't care.
it's not a perfect fit. Yeah, they're like, it's a
Yeah,
headache that they don't want. The juice
yeah,
isn't worth the squeeze for them. But when you think about the um the type of attorney that you need to add for the segment of law that you're doing, I mean, besides yourself, of course, kind of walk me through what the like perfect attorney would be like. What skill set would they have to be able to move this quick, but also be this thorough? And
yeah.
that those things aren't always in line, right?
Sure, yeah. No, it's definitely an odd specialty. I've also joked for several decades now that you either love immigration or you hate it. Nobody's in the middle.
Yeah.
Right? So I talk to a lot of attorneys who think we are absolutely insane. No one in their right mind would take a job like this and actually like it. My gosh, right?
Yeah.
So you have to have that connection, that passion for it. But I also feel that you really do have to be extremely detail oriented. Um, you need to love process procedure. I guess I'm projecting a little bit here because not every immigration lawyer is maybe as obsessed with technology and and is not as big an IT geek as I am. So there are other ways to do it, but in our firm, yes, you need to be very comfortable with the fact that we have built custom software to do nothing but manage the volume of cases that we have, because there are so many data points that we have to keep track of, so many expirations, so much reporting that happens in addition to the production. And if you're not comfortable with that, if you just like a yellow legal pad and writing down your to-dos today, this is probably not the field for you.
Yeah. Well, besides not being an attorney, the process and the details, I've been marked out of this field several times just during this conversation. So,
I was just about to offer you that privilege.
I was gonna wait until we got offline to see if you needed some help, but I you talked about passion, and the way we met is because of your involvement in a number of sort of HR groups and organizations.
Mhm.
Talk about your involvement in sort of the HR space. I mean, like full disclosure, we both work with HR really closely. Obviously, me on the broker side, you on the law and immigration side. But why does that work for you? Why? Because you're not there sort of selling your services per se. You're really there as a resource. Why? When I think about you in many ways, you you are very similar, generally speaking, to a lot of the HR folks.
Yeah.
And I feel like in a past life, I could have been in HR myself, right? I always say I could have been an HR or a therapist, right? And sometimes those two things are the same. Like, talk about your connection with the HR field, and why do you do so much work? Why are you always volunteering all your time in those spaces?
Yeah, as my wife likes to say, you don't have any friends, you just have HR people. I tell them that's because they're really cool people. They're really fun. But I think that's a good observation, because I do feel like a kindred spirit with the HR community. And as I said, we're typically very busy, so I'm not out there, hard selling, trying to expand my book of business. And also, I'm very much a fan, especially at this age, of my nice, small, nimble team. I have no interest in running a 20-person law firm. It just feels like a nightmare to me. But how I originally started getting involved in a lot of these HR groups is kind of a funny story. This goes back, God, it's got to be at least 15 or so years. HR is our main contact at our clients, unlike most lawyers, right? We don't talk to the CFO, we don't talk to the general counsel's office hardly at all. We are considered sort of an ancillary employee benefit, right? And we're treated as such. And often the cost per employee for what we do is fairly small. So HR has the budget, they pay for it. It's not, again, not what most other attorneys do with their clients. So again, I shouldn't say several because it's more than a decade, many years ago, gray beard, many years ago, one of my HR contacts said, hey, a group of us get together for drinks every now and then. Do you want to come by? And I just thought, oh, that's really nice. Okay, I'll come by. And it was actually a meeting of the HRAGD, the Human Resource Association of Greater Detroit, who had just recently rebranded to be Detroit SHRM. And I show up in the room, and within 10 minutes, I'm looking around thinking, wait a minute, you're a client, you guys have all been hanging out together, and this is the first time you call me for drinks, right? Because I love my cocktails, right? And I was just hooked. I said, well, all my favorite people are hanging out in the room. So I just started coming to every single one of those. And eventually you get kind of grabbed by the back of the collar and say, well, you're on the board, right? You seem to be all over the place.
Yeah.
And that was what, 10, 11 straight years now of being on the boards of various HR organizations, and just kind of hanging out in any community of HR people where I thought, you know what, these people are a lot of fun. It's a lot more fun than hanging out with a group of lawyers. So
Well,
yeah.
to your point, I love the different sort of disciplines of HR, you know, the different personalities, you know,
Yeah.
we're in the people business. Regardless of how much paperwork you have to complete, you're still in the people business, right? And you know that.
Mhm.
I know that from an insurance standpoint, insurance impacts the people, so we have to communicate that, sort of boil it down where it makes sense for the folks that we're dealing with, and not only the employers, the folks in leadership, but also the employees, the folks that
Mm.
are going to the doctor and the dentist
Mhm.
every
Right.
day, and making sure that they have what they need and they're educated on the actual benefits that they do have, right? So I love the fact that the people in those roles are typically, not solely, but typically the HR people are those people that are advocating for everyone, but really on behalf of the employees. I love that service sort of mentality, that attitude, and it's like whatever they need, right? I want to be able
Yeah.
to assist, but just like any nonprofit or any sort of organization, if you're hanging around too much, they're gonna be like, here, go do something, right? Go make
Right.
yourself useful.
Yeah.
So, but I can say that your your work and what you do, you're definitely have earned your keep.
Mm.
Uh, and kudos to all the work that you do, because I know it's not always easy. You know, you got a whole firm and family and all that jazz. So just
Right.
all the folks that are volunteering and helping, making life easier for everyone else. I mean, that's huge. That's a huge sort of contribution to society. So
Well, I
kudos to
appreciate
you.
that. Yeah. I think
Yeah.
my wife would say it's a toxic inability to say no, but that's a whole separate problem.
Show her this clip.
Yeah,
This is the clip
exactly.
we're going to use for
Yeah.
LinkedIn. So show her this clip,
There you go.
and then maybe she'll change her mind. Probably not, but we have another argument, another perspective that we can
Yeah.
provide. So,
And I would completely agree that immigration is as much a people business as HR. Right. Again, for decades, I've joked with my clients that I'm 50% attorney, 50% personal therapist to your very jumpy foreign workers. And it's literally half of my time is spent just kind of talking these people off the edge, saying, don't worry, I've got you, right? You're not getting deported. You're not getting sent home to Iran where, it would be dangerous. We will figure this out. Never, knock on wood, never lost one yet. I'm not losing you.
yeah.
And it's a very important thing. I have, believe it or not, fired clients who refused to let me talk to their employees.
Mm.
And it was not only because I felt that it was personally wrong on kind of a moral level almost, but it also just makes my job harder, right? If the employee is bugging their manager, who talks to HR, who then talks to me, and the answer goes back 4 levels, we've just now quadrupled the number of emails, and it's going to be like the telephone game, right? Something's
Mm-hmm.
not going to get through in the end. So
Exactly.
I'm a big
Exactly.
fan of knowing my clients' employees, talking to them directly. I mean, you can't really see it on this camera, but my office here is actually full of things that my clients' employees have brought me from back home just because they were so happy that we got them the visa they needed or the green card or whatever it was, and they bring us little gifts.
That's
So
amazing. That's amazing. So what I'll say as we wrap is, you talked about your sort of your anal retentive sort of personality, right? You're
yeah,
very specific that way, very detail oriented. Um, but you're also very people oriented and people centric. And I think that I know that that's another reason why you take your job so serious, is because you have these people's sort of futures in your hands many times.
100%.
And I know you don't take that lightly. So not only do you want to get the paperwork right, you want to make sure you're taking care of the person.
Right. And I
Yeah.
don't want them, worrying about this all day long and not doing their job, right? That's bad for my client, but also bad for their mental health, right? So,
Yes. Yeah. If you've ever dealt with anything minor or major or anything in between while you need to get through your work day, you know that type of strain. So being able to take something that huge off of someone's plate Yeah, I mean, it's a huge, huge, huge relief when they know they're in great hands. And you've done this for over 35 years now. So kudos to you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm too old to learn anything new, so this is it.
Well, I think you got a good, I think your future, you got a good future ahead of you still. He is the principal attorney and founder of AMS Global Immigration. He is an upstanding gentleman, friend of mine, and just an overall really amazing human being. And I've said this on and off camera. Chris Allen, thank you so much for joining the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and I feel the same way about you.
Oh, thank you. You should have said that while we were in our conversation. Look, I just want to tell everyone who's listening or who may be watching this is that you are all capable. You just need to embrace your own frequency. Okay. So on behalf of Chris, I am Baxter E. Hall. Until next time, peace.
See ya.
Welcome into his brain. Welcome into his frequency. Enter at your own risk. Come be at peace with me.
Thank you so much for watching this video. If you haven't already, please hit the like button. Please subscribe, share, and also hit that notification button as well. Thank you so much.
Financial literacy to authentic Black history. This real rap.